Regular meeting of the Board of Finance for Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. Thanks everyone for coming. I will take this a little out of order since the chief is here with his team to talk about some appropriations they need, and we can get into treasury stuff if that's okay. So we're going to talk about a special appropriation for the overly problematic HVAC system at the police station. Chief?
Good evening.
Hi.
For the record, Don Anderson from the police department. In 1983, when they hired me to walk the beat and give out parking tickets, I never envisioned I'd be standing here requesting money for a mechanical system in the police department, but here I stand. And as I explained to the Board of Selectmen last night, our building was renovated and expanded substantially starting in 2011 and completed and occupied fully in 2012. I was promoted to Administrative Services Captain in November of 2013, and in the intervening 6+ years, I have spent an inordinate amount of time on mechanical systems, including the HVAC system in our building. Encon was the company who put the system in. Encon has been our provider for maintenance contracts since. I think we've given them ample opportunity to address the ongoing HVAC issues that we've had. In the intervening time since I've been a captain, we've spent over $95,000 with them on maintenance and services contracts. In addition, between $40,000 and $50,000 on repairs and system malfunctions. And the main thing for us is we're a 24/7, 365 operation. And we have a HVAC system currently that is effectively a 2-season system. It works fine in the spring, works pretty fine in the fall. The issues come out in the dead of summer and the dead of winter. There's been occurrences ongoing where in our report room, which is kind of our center hub of doing work, that officers basically have to take off their ballistic vest and their shirts and sit there in their t-shirts and do reports because we have temperatures high 80s, low 90s. Conversely, in the dead of winter in our break room, we have officers eating their lunch with their coats on because it's on an outside wall and we see temperatures in the 40s and 50s in there. We have done extensive repair work and patchwork, and at the end of the day, the HVAC system and the condenser that's on the roof and our building management system simply has to be replaced. Most of you know, who know me, that I'm not looking to spend money unnecessarily. There's nothing really sexy here. It's not a widescreen TV. It's not a new pool. It's certainly just a mechanical system that we need in our building to effectively run the police department. Ed Gentile and Tony Campanella from the DPW, also Dave Sabini, have been instrumental in assisting. What I know about HVAC kind of fit in a half a thimble when I started. Now I know just enough to make sure that they're not snowing me when they're coming explaining what's wrong with our system. So they've been very instrumental in assisting us. We have a proposal here to replace our building management system, which is currently a Johnson control system. When it was installed in 2011, unbeknownst to anyone involved in the project, it was a product that was either actively being sunsetted or was sunsetted very shortly thereafter when it was put in our building. It is a proprietary closed system, can only be accessed by Encon. Our in-house staff here in the town of Darien can look at the system, but they cannot make any changes to the system without a call being made to the service technician. What we're proposing to get with the automated logic system is an open source system that our folks here in Darien can not only view, they can go in remotely or on the computer at headquarters and make the changes that we need. In the last 6 years, we've experienced mold in our department. In the administrative area, all the wall coverings had to be taken down. We had mold remediation. The walls had to be sealed and repainted. Behind that wall covering was significant mold in the chief's office that took quite some doing to undo. We've also had humidity issues in our locker rooms to the point where we had to throw equipment away because mold was growing onto the inside of the lockers. So it has been a challenge, to say the least, over the last 6 years that I've been involved in this, trying to keep the building running. The automated logic folks sat across the table from us, and I asked a very simple question because I'm a layman and not an HVAC technician. Will what you're proposing solve our issue? where we should not be talking about HVAC 12 months a year, especially when the seasons change. And they tell me with almost utmost certainty that the building management system that we're proposing for automated logic will do that for us. And hopefully it will be like our heating systems in our homes, I hope, and our telephone, that it just works and you're not talking about it consistently. So as far as the nuts and bolts of this, I turn it over to the experts, but we need this system for our building to run effectively.
So I'm not sure how much, Tony Campanella, Supervisor, DPW. I'm not sure how much you know about the system or how much you want to know. Need a quick overview? Yes? Okay, so there's two parts of the system that we're looking to replace. One is the kind of brains, the BMS, Building Management System, and that takes a lot of factors, the outside temperature, the inside temperature, how much we have to exchange air, humidity, so forth, and makes decisions on whether to bring air in from the outside, whether to run condensers, run heaters. So the current system just is doing a terrible job making decisions, and that's why we're having all these problems. The second component is a 30-ton rooftop unit, condensing unit, just a simple rooftop unit that is 7 years old, but is aged like it's much older because of a couple reasons. I'd say the main reason is because the building management system, which tells that unit to turn on, has short-cycled it. So a 7-year unit has the amount of starts of I don't know how old, but a much, much, much older unit with replaced parts and parts and parts and parts. It's not worth salvaging. So those are the two parts of the system. The automated logic system, that's the BMS. It's a very well-respected system. Anyone in the industry would agree with me. The people that did our recommissioning report agree with us. It's an excellent system. We use it here. Again, there's several components to an HVAC system. We're very, very happy with the building management system here. There are some other issues that are on the docket to be addressed in terms of HVAC here in Town Hall. So it's not one component that makes a system. But in terms of the BMS, it's really a great system to use, and it works. So answer any questions you have.
Well, thanks very much for that.
Sure.
Few things are worse in a building than having an HVAC system that doesn't work, so I feel your pain. A few questions from me. Is there any issue with the Encore contract? You guys are paying them $95,000 a year. Is that something you can simply terminate and move on, or is there an issue with that?
$95,000 figure, that was over the last 6 years since I've been the administrative services captain. That's about $20,000, give or take, a year for the service contract.
Okay.
That contract covers belts, filter changes, things of that, but does not cover system failures.
Got it. So would you continue to work with those guys on that type of work?
No.
Because is that the entity that's been responsible for the operation or maintenance of the system, or?
Candidly, they have been given ample opportunity to give us the trajectory that we need to fix this issue, and they have not been responsive to the level that I would expect. Yes, they come and get us back up and running again, but the long-term solutions that I think should have been proposed well before now were not forthcoming. So we would be looking to switch vendors for our building maintenance.
For everything else, so they would be out of the picture at some near-term point.
I don't think that would be a surprise to them if they're watching on TV, because we have had numerous conversations over the last 6 years when it's 9:30 or 9:45 at night and the captain and chief of police are on the roof with screwdrivers and wrenches trying to get the system up and running. So they know where we stand as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And no issue, I think, to John's point about canceling that contract?
The time frame that we'd be looking, start of the fiscal year, we want to get this up and running before the heat of the summer, and that's why. As far as them potentially servicing it up to that point, I don't see any real issue, but we certainly will be looking to make a change. I don't see any big disparity bringing in a new service contract company. I believe it will be in the ballpark of a similar figure.
And the system that you're contemplating to replace this with, is this used by other departments and is a sort of solid reputation in terms of?
I would again defer to the experts, but this is the company that did the Apple building in California to the tune of $500 million in HVAC work. So they're highly regarded. They work here at the town hall. And
I'd rather not spend that much money. But.
Yeah, Apple didn't either, but they do come highly regarded in the industry. I do believe, based on our dealings with them thus far, that they are going to solve the issue that we need solved.
Okay. Is this shovel ready? In other words, if once you get the appropriation, you guys can move on this and have it ready?
I'll defer to Tony, but I believe that is a yes.
Well, the two pieces, the rooftop unit, as soon as we get the okay, we're going to go ahead and order it. That's fairly cut and dry. The lead time for the BMS work a little bit longer, but we're gonna start on it right away. You know, we won't be working on it tomorrow if we get the okay, but we'll be working on getting it going.
Okay. My only other question before I turn it over is there anything else that needs to be addressed as part of this, right? So when you had this system that, because of its failure, actually impacted this piece of equipment that you're looking at, either that pertains to the HVAC system or HVAC system or anything else in the building. I hear about all this in a fairly new building when we were all sort of on top of this in terms of design and equipment and vendor selection, and I worry that maybe there's something else that we should be considering, particularly that's related to this system, just so you don't put in this one new thing and you've got several other things that are problematic that it still doesn't work.
This will cover a strong majority of the issues we have. The other small mechanical issues identified in our recommissioning report, a lot of them we've already knocked off already. Some of them, you know, if this half of the room is on fire, it kind of doesn't matter if this window's cracked open a little bit. You couldn't even tell the difference if it was. So once the major bulk of this of our problems are taken care of with the BMS, and that's what will happen, these other one-offs will be much easier to identify and fix. So we really believe this is going to bring us, you know, 80, 90% there. I don't know percentages, but, you know, close enough to be significant.
The town did fund a retro commissioning report with Sustainable Energy Solutions, who are recognized in the field as basically the Cadillac of companies that are doing this.
Okay.
They did come in and they reported to us, which I was very happy to hear, is that the mechanical devices like in the penthouse, where all this is the ductwork, that is very sound and it is industry standard, so they had no qualms with the majority of the equipment that is there.
Okay.
If we were discussing this in medical terms, we need a cardiologist and a neurologist. You know, neither the brain and the heart are just not working right.
And possibly a psychologist.
We need doctors working together to get this squared away.
Okay. Then I only had one other technical question, which is we're taking this out of fund balance instead of Board of Finance contingency or some other source. Is there a reason for that?
Because of the amount as well as the nature of it. It's probably going to cause some discussion, so we felt it was best to get out of fund balance so that it will go before the RTM.
Okay.
Would this be deemed capital?
Yes, it will be capital. But so it'll be pulled from fund balance to contribute to the capital fund.
Does the fact that this needs to be appropriated slow this down inordinately?
Inordinately, no. Ed and I have talked about that, and we think we can work with the timing. Saw a little smirk over there.
Absolutely.
Ed is okay working with the timing. It's going to be before the RTM at their March meeting.
Okay. Jack, do you have any comments on this?
No, we've actually, in order to facilitate, we have several committees that are meeting on this on the 4th jointly. We're meeting on the, I believe, the 16th, and I just think it's going to fly through. So down the 17th, they should be able to put it in order.
Okay.
One small one. Go ahead, Jeff.
Then I have a couple of questions. I feel like the work that NCON did was borderline malpractice. I mean, to put you in that position. Do we have any recourse with them at all?
When I was promoted to administrative services captain, it was under the reign of Chief Lovello, so it was 2 chiefs ago. By the time that the major malfunctions of the system started occurring, the mechanicals were out of warranty. We did have ongoing discussions on whether litigation or something of that ilk would be warranted. I took one side and he took the other, and my side didn't win. So I was looking back then to try to squeeze something out of that stone based on the fact that even though technically out of warranty, it was not working up to spec, in my opinion. That was back in 2013.
And I noticed that NCON was listed as the controls contractor in the retro commissioning report. Was that by choice or default?
The control,
It says there was the owner, which was the police department, the commissioning authority, which was sustainable engineering, and the controls contractor was
right.
NCON.
Again, that is a proprietary system to them.
So they had to be there.
That's right.
Okay. And then I also noticed that there were a lot in the estimates, especially in the rewiring. Like, does all that rewiring really need to be done? And have we looked at all the things that are very specifically listed as not included in those totals, including sales tax?
I have to defer to Tony on that one.
So the rewiring has to be done. It's not so much replacing wire that exists. For the automated logic sensors to operate and speak to each other, it's almost new wire for the automated logic system. They work differently. The automated logics, all the they're called VAVs, are kind of valves in the air ducts that, you know, each area, each room has one. They talk to each other to see what the other ones are doing. To do that, we need to run all this wire. So it's not replacing wire that exists. It's just kind of new stuff.
And all the non-inclusions, have we gone through all that carefully to make sure that we are including all the real costs of the project?
Yes, both contractors have been talking to each other, making sure everything's covered. On the report, actually, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to on
the Caruso Electric Company report. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff I highlighted that is specifically not included, including sales tax, but the total that's listed is the total that we're using.
Okay, so Caruso, we've replaced Caruso's quote. We found some cost savings there, so we're identified a different company to run the wire. We've handed that company over to Automated Logic, so they've gone through everything to make sure it's fully covered.
Great.
Yeah.
And one other thing, the cost of the rooftop unit from Carrier, we let them know that we were a little bit unhappy with the performance of that unit as well. So the cost, the ultimate they quoted us was a discounted cost for that unit, for some goodwill for us. So I know the guys at the DPW have been working very diligently to make sure that we get this for the lowest figure that we can put on the table to make it work.
I'm good.
You good, Dan?
The BMS has a 1-year warranty. Is that as much as we can get, or is that the most cost-efficient warranty that we can get?
I think it's standard that it's 1 year. After that, we generally will sign a 5-year maintenance agreement, which is much more economical than going year to year.
Okay. And then should we presume that DPW concurs both with the scope of the recommendation and the vendor selected?
Yes.
Other questions or comments?
Just one comment.
Please.
Being on, I think I've been on police for 6 years now. It's actually amazing it's taken this long to get here. I was kind of thinking, I was saying this to the chief before, that it would be here a little earlier. I think every time we sat with the group, they would always talk about this issue. So it's glad we're finally putting some money toward this and get this thing settled, not having the same repetitive conversation that we've had over the years. So I'm fully in favor of this.
I was going to recommend we vote it down. I don't know what you're talking about. Clearly something we needed. I'm absolutely in favor of this for all the reasons discussed. If no other comments, motion to approve. Paul, second. Rob, all in favor? Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck with this project. So we also had the police facility maintenance and repair thing for $10,000. I'm sorry. What else? What is that, Jen? Is that something I need to stay for? Or?
It's related, but I can handle that.
Okay. Why don't we just cover that briefly?
Do you want to say for the facilities maintenance?
I mean, it seems straightforward. You want to touch on that briefly? Or?
Sure. So the in the transfers, you'll see one for police facility maintenance and repair for $10,000. This is related to the ongoing repairs of the HVAC system. It's in the operating budget. They're going over budget because of the repairs, but this is expected to make them whole.
I mean, I'm fine with this. Anybody have any questions?
So this isn't necessarily more money being spent, this is just shifting around into the accounts to bring them up to balance?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, motion to approve. Jim, second. Paul, all in favor? Okay, good. Okay, now, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, why don't we go back to the top of the agenda. So this is investment policy and portfolio members memo. Joan Hendrickson, our treasurer.
Okay. I just asked Ed if he's going to do the same thing for this building. He said yes.
There's too much hot air in this building. It simply can't be solved. Thank you for coming, Joan. We appreciate it. We've got the materials that you've passed out here, so I look forward to the discussion.
Okay. John and I spoke briefly this afternoon. In terms of the investment policy, I would like to move that forward. My own position is I've done what I can on the investment policy. Most of you are aware, I don't know if people are aware, but I had asked Wayne to do an opinion on the relationship with the Board of Finance and
Which you saw, I sent that around the board.
Good.
And copied,
okay,
copied
so everybody's got it.
Yep,
That was my initiation originally. Given his answer, John would like to make some changes in the investment policy. I'm good with whatever changes you want to make.
Well, and also Frank's got some legal points in there that
He
might
does.
soften things. That's for you, and so I kind of want to take all that into account. So I'm certainly fine with tabling the policy discussion to March.
I'd like to do, and again, my suggestion is that we do a working group and come back to the board. Again, I'm good with whatever you come up with. If you want me there, I'm good, but I've given several of you copies of this where you've added your own comments, and then if we just go with what Wayne added, I'm good with it, but however you decide to do it. But I did want to table it tonight because I think we can do other things other than wordsmithing tonight. That's kind
Perfectly fine.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. I have a few things that I do want to talk about tonight. You all have a packet that you've been given with exhibits, and I'm going to use this opportunity to do some history, to talk about other legal opinions that Wayne has given, because, again, they were not part of that memo, but individual ones I have asked him for. So I've talked to people, and in the last year, we seem to have an inordinate amount of interest in investment income, which is 1/3 of 1% of the budget. So, I've asked people, I said, well, why is this happening? Because I've been treasurer for 14 years, and someone said, well, it's people's comfort zone. We have a lot of people in finance. And finally, someone said to me, you know what, Joan? It's just sexier than sewers. So that is really where I'm coming from tonight, that I understand people are really interested in it. And I would like to go through just some of the history. You all have Exhibit 1 here, which is our investment general fund income back to 1986. This is me going through the CAFRs and the vaults and then adding. There was a lot of comment and some criticism of that 767,460 number. And attached to your Exhibit 1, you will see Fed funds rate charts. And one is from 2010, one is from 2000, And what you can see is the Fed did something different. We were on target for 9 years before that. And then in 2018-19, the Fed went up and then they went down. In Exhibit 2, I have given you an article, and to make this user-friendly, if you turn to the second page, I've highlighted that section, so you don't even have to read the whole article. You can just read what Jerome Powell said that they did, which was they decided to raise it, and then they hit a global crisis, and then they lowered it. So that was why we were off. And again, I will go back to this article when we start talking about some pre-budget stuff. But again, you can see they went from up to 250 at some point during December of 2018, and then they're dropping back down. As you probably know, the Fed doesn't call me when they're going to do these types of things, and most of us are not aware that they're doing them. But that is the historical reason why our numbers were so much larger than what we anticipated. It was really the rate movement, but nothing else really had changed. But when you're looking at 20 basis points for years and years and years, and then suddenly you're at 2.5%, it changes the dynamic and it changes the numbers. We are projecting, and my thesis that I like to use is that money is a fungible commodity. It's very hard to project commodity prices. I don't think any of us can even project what the price of a quart of milk is going to be in 18 months. So again, it is very hard to project going forward, which is why this year John had asked me to find a different methodology, which I did. And that is, we're not going to skip right to that, but that's Exhibit 4. Where I gave you 4 scenarios as to what our budget numbers could be based on what we believe the Fed funds rates are. But there's a lot of caveats to that before we get to the budget. Again, John, I don't know how much of this you want to go through, but I'd like to talk about 3 things that Wayne has given us opinions on before we get into the investment portfolio document. I know a lot of people are very excited about doing treasuries. One of the issues that we have had, and I'd like to talk about that, is that we've tried 3 times since, in my 14 years here, to do a treasury facility. Each time it has been turned down by Wayne because he doesn't like the documentation. It is securities documentation. It is not a banking documentation. For those of you who are in securities, it is a plain vanilla thing, but he's trying to keep our best interests as a town under wraps. What I have done, because this really is not something I can decide, I have asked him to talk with you as a board about his objections and to see if you can come up with a policy decision as to what you would like to do about treasuries. Economically, for me, there is no reason I need to do them. Last time I looked at one of them, it was 134. I get rates well above that. But I know people are very interested in trying to do that. But I think it has to happen between the board and Wayne as to what documentation is acceptable, why is it acceptable, why is it not acceptable. It's really not an operating issue for me. It's really a policy issue for you. And I've talked about this with Jen, and we both agreed we were burning a lot of resources and not coming up with an answer. And I have tried 3 different banks, 3 different broker-dealers over 14 years. So it's not a question of the individual dealers or a problem. It's a question of the concept. Again, nobody has a concept with treasuries being good, bad, or indifferent. It is a documentation issue. Okay, so I am passing that off to you and Wayne. The second issue is STIF. Again, we have a lot of people who are very interested in STIF. I've got people who just love it, people who hate it. For those of you, I think everybody on the board knows the history of STIF, that in the 2007, 2008 period, They did a very bad investment. They're an $8 billion fund. They used up half of their reserve with a bad investment. It was a structured investment vehicle. They had a ton of other asset-backed stuff in there. And after that, Stiff really had to revamp what it was doing. We had a working group meeting, conference call with Stiff. I think Dan was on it, Jen was on it, I was on it, Jamie, Wayne, I think that's it. When we talked to the investment officer, who, I was very pleased with his answers. I thought he did a great job explaining. Again, the caveat was that Wayne needed to get back to their counsel and talk with their counsel, because Stiff holds reserves as a policy. Wayne wanted to talk about what the statute was and how that played into holding reserves or moving money. Well, unfortunately, the bad news is that counsel has not been very cooperative. He's stonewalled Wayne, which was disappointing because we really did have a great meeting with them. So Stiff, until Wayne can get those answers from Stiff, that is pretty much off the table. We are a Stiff shareholder. We have been always a Stiff shareholder. All of our grants and ECS money come in through Stiff, but that issue needs to be clarified, and they're stonewalling it. So that's on the table. The third term, and again, this is a more policy-driven, is we talk about transparency. Transparency, I have no problem with it. It's like mom, apple pie. It's a good thing. But what do we actually mean by that term as it relates to my reporting and my relationship with you? And I think that needs to be defined more specifically. So does it mean that someone sits at my shoulder every day when I'm doing transactions, or does it mean that I report to you what we do on a monthly, quarterly, whatever basis? I think we need to have, or you as a board need to have this discussion of what you want that to mean. Because it certainly affects me and what I can and cannot do. I need that term defined. Again, there's nothing wrong with the term. It's just I need to know what it means to you and what that involves policy-wise. So with that, those three things, again, I think that's all new to you. Those were all things I discussed with Wayne. He concurs with all of it, what I've said. And we can move on to Exhibit 3, which is the investment portfolio document. You all should have gotten it. I gave you an extra copy in case anybody forgot theirs tonight. I'm always a belt and suspenders person here for these meetings. Again, I thank Jen because she's the one who came up with the idea. Actually, I say she gave me my joke is she gave me a good talking to, and we came up jointly with this idea. And my concern on releasing numbers is releasing numbers out of context. The investment portfolio, I describe it as a giant jigsaw puzzle. There are pieces that we do for different reasons at different times and how we manage it. And each investment has a purpose or a meaning or why we do them. Again, one of the things that I like to highlight, it's one I think people probably go nuts with if they just saw it as a single investment, is on Chase, where I'm getting 36 basis points. That is the singular most important investment I have. For the reason being, when we got into the financial crisis, I moved $40 million into that fund at 16 basis points for a year. And when I truly whined to my banker, Chase banker, saying, come on, I got $40 million there, can't you do better for me? And he goes, Joan, the county of Westchester has $400 million. They did exactly what I did. And he goes, they're getting the same rate as you are. And I said, okay, let's move on. Again, out of context, that makes no sense. But in context with our history, it makes great sense. That's my safety net. Okay? So I think this document is pretty self-explanatory. One of the things that I think, again, is important in looking at municipal finance, and I will put in my plug right now, we are very, very fortunate in this town to have two excellent municipal finance officers, that's being Jen and Kate. They know their stuff, they are excellent at what they do, and I go to them all the time to make sure that I am on the straight and narrow. But when you do a municipal deposit, it is not the same as you going down to Chase and buying a CD. If I buy a CD from them, my rate is going to be lower because they are putting up 100% collateral on my deposit. I get what's known as a certificate of public depository, and just so you have an idea, I'm not going to pass it around, but this is what it looks like. I just got this today from Chase, and it tells me where that collateral is being held. In the case of the one I got today, they're actually holding twice as much collateral with the Federal Home Loan Bank, which is full faith and credit of the United States. And it is a letter of credit that is being held. I think they've got, it says 53 million in public deposits, and they're holding 53 million and 101 million in collateral. Sounds good to me. But every municipal deposit, that is, you have to do that, okay? Plus, in addition, for the first $250,000, we get FDIC insurance. That's not a big deal with the amounts that we're talking about, but it helps. So it's, in terms of what people like to, and again, it's a term that everybody uses, but again, I'm not quite sure how to do it, benchmarking. The only benchmarks that make sense are against other municipal deposits. And how do we get hold of those municipal deposits if they're not released by other towns or elsewhere? Again, the rules are different in municipal finance. And that's, as I said, I'm very lucky to have Jen who will tell me when I'm missing something. In terms of where we compare vis-a-vis Fed funds, it's, if you look at our rates across here, and I do have an update to this, and this comes back to the transparency issue, is our money markets are the closest thing we have to the Fed funds rates, where you can match them up. Our money market rates for across the board are 36, 125, 131, 141, and I am very happy to say as an update, and again, this comes into the transparency issue. If you turn to page 5 of your memo, you will see TD Bank. And again, these numbers were done as of December, the end of December, because I wrote the memo in January, and those are the numbers that I had. That 7 million, some of you don't know my history, but I did spend a couple years in workout, and I'm quite good at negotiating choices that people can make. And I talked with this bank, they're a very good bank, but I explained to them at 70 basis points that they were well below what I needed, and that there were other people who really liked me more, who would give me more money, and that perhaps they would want to rethink their position. And within one day, they rethought their position, and we are now getting 150 basis points on that. When you did your bonding, where we bought back bonds, this is where we took the money out of, because it was our lowest rate. But again, I believe in giving people choices. I believe in, my bankers and being honest with them. And the choice was I was going to have to move their $7 million elsewhere if they couldn't bring this up. And they made what I would call a good business decision. The CD, as you can see by the date, came due. By the way, that was done on February 14th. The CD for $2 million plus is now at 154, and that was renewed. What the problem is, again, with the transparency issue is, I told you that amount today that's going to happen. It will not show up in our ledgers until the end of March. I mean, until, we won't get our February numbers towards the end of March, and the full amount of the 150 won't show up till April. That's just the way our bank statements come in. There is a lag period. And that's part of the issue I have with transparency. What do we mean by it? I can give you what those numbers are, but you're always going to have that lag. So I want you just to consider it as a concept and what you want to do about that. I am open to any questions you might have on this memo.
I appreciate you coming here. A couple of points I'd make. So just to summarize where we are, we've tabled the investment policy discussion, and we're going to ponder that over the next month, and we'll revisit that in March. As for your 3 points around the Treasury facility, we'll definitely talk to Wayne, so we'll
You and
see what
Wayne.
to say about
Yep.
that. Stiff, duly
You and
noted.
Wayne.
Duly noted. The transparency point is a good one, and so I think one of the things that we're going to do internally and think about and talk about in March is what is our response to Wayne's memo, right? So Wayne has provided his professional legal opinion as to what the statutes are that govern the relationship between the Board of Finance and the Treasurer, and I think all that was extremely helpful, and you in fact responded.
I was delighted with it,
right.
truthfully.
Thrilled, delighted, ecstatic. There was some adjective in there used. I forget what that
I
was.
said totally thrilled, I think, when I wrote the memo, because it did define things that needed to be defined.
It was a good response, and so I agree with that. And I've got a couple of sort of poorly formed ideas in terms of what we could do for that, and I'd like to run them by Wayne, and we'll try to get Frank involved. I'd like to get his thoughts as well. But what we'll do is collaborate, right? So I want to make sure that you know what that is. I'd like Jack involved in this, and let's see if we can come up with something we can all stack hands on and say that that actually works well in terms of defining the Board of Finance's responsibility for all this. I think it is going to be more oversight as opposed to checking individual transactions. To your point, we don't really have the time to do that, so I'm not suggesting that we do that at all. But I do think we want to be thoughtful about this and come up with something that we can discuss with you and then present publicly and try to come up with something that is workable. So I think we might be done with that discussion unless any of you all had any questions. I actually wanted to ask a question about the budget for this year.
I just would like to say that I think this is very constructive, that this conversation that we're having is very constructive. I also think that, to your point on transparency and not really understanding, the more we talk, the better we're informed, the less bad conclusions we can draw from a data point or a fact. So I think this is the spirit of this conversation is really constructive, so thank you.
Thank you,
I
Dan.
agree.
And again, that was what was important to me, that this be in context. Again, part of this is, some of you don't know me. I have been in town government for 26 years. I have been treasurer. This is my 15th year. That means 15 elections for those of you who are political like me, nine of which were for treasurer. So I have seen where this job has come, and the job of the treasurer has fundamentally changed over those 15 years. There were issues that came up, and again, I'll share one with you, which people are shocked at, but I carry funny book bags because I used to have to go to the bank with $200,000 in cash and checks every day. We don't do that anymore. Okay, that's how basic some of this stuff was. People in town hall know me for my bizarre book bags, but it discouraged a lot of people thinking I was carrying a lot of cash around. That's how basic we were. We have come a long way. My job and role has changed, mostly because of the cash management systems we put in, the electronic systems, treasury systems we've put in. So what I started with is not where I am now. And it's hard for me because, again, you are new and you don't know the history of what we had.
Well, we're still going to talk to you, but keep the book bags, right? We got to.
No, the book bags are my trademark now.
It's kind of exactly a trademark. Or
but that's seriously. I mean, that was why I did it, because and when it got up to $250,000, I called Dwayne Lavello and he sent a cop over to take me to the bank.
So one thing I want to do is, so we'll defer all that to March. The one thing I did want to ask just briefly about is you presented a budget for your interest income to the Board of Selectmen, and they have changed that. Could you please comment on that?
Now, Jen has warned me that you haven't officially, catch me here.
Yeah, I would say that that is a question that we should reserve until you have received the budget and are
Okay,
deliberating.
fair point.
But I
I'll do
can
that.
talk about
We're
the
going to
memo
wait.
that I have sent you as a precursor to the budget without getting
Fortunately, this memo is in sufficient detail that those comments might not be necessary, given what Jen has told us, so, unless you insist.
I will make one comment, and again, Jen might slap me, but, because we just had this conversation this afternoon, because we have to.
She's smiling pleasantly.
She's smiling.
That's a warning.
That's good. That's good. The Board of Selectmen did change. I gave you, and let's back up. When the number last year was so off from what the projection was, even though the 9 years before it was on target, John said, do you think you could come up with a different methodology? Could you rethink this? And I said yes. And so I did. That was how I spent my summer rethinking how we ought to do this. So what I did, again, was go against our Fed funds rate and create scenarios for our Fed funds rate. You all do have a copy of this. It's in your files. So again, this is a precursor to the budget, Jen. I recommended, because Jen would only allow me to put one number into the system, that we go with scenario 3, which was 554,583. As of today, and again, remember we lag, we have 516,000 roughly in-house. That's what we've made for this year so far, okay? And that is as of when I checked Munis, and I had to get out of Munis because we're doing something tonight with it. So, but that was the last number I checked. That doesn't include, that's still probably 5 more months to go into Munis. Again, the way our money comes in, we're very wealthy in January, and then we winnow down. One of the things that I have not included in my budget, and again, this is a Board of Finance issue also that I will turn over to you, is I only did my numbers on what I call recurring revenue. I got them from Kathy, from what was 2019, including December of 2018, correct? Is that correct? Okay. Because people pay in December so they can get 2 tax payments in the same year. So that money came in, and I only based my projections off of recurring revenues. When I was doing the numbers, I looked at Jen and I said, do we really go into the fund balance in like 2 or 3 months before the end of the year? And she goes, no, that's not what happens, Joan, because that's what I was showing. She said, we have fees that come in. Those fees can be up to $10 million. But when do they come in? Are they going to come in? You know, if they come in, anything that was non-recurring. I used your example, for example, ECS money. You put it back to 0 for a few years. I didn't include it. So that is, I don't know what other people's budgets are and what fees are really expected. From a board perspective, you do. Okay, if all of that came in the beginning of the year, 10 million, and let's just, it's easy because so I can do it in my head, that'd be another 100,000. We're not talking huge amounts of money. So that's a decision on a board level, because I'm not going to include that in my projection.
Okay.
The Board of Selectmen, and I did speak with Jamie, decided to raise that number.
Okay. We'll tell you what we'll do is, I'll take Jen's advice, we'll wait till we formally receive that budget, and we'll do a proper inquiry as to what you presented to them originally, and then what their decision was, and then we'll come to our own point of view. So,
okay.
Thank you.
But you have all the information you need.
Okay.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Joan, historically, just the comment about us looking into the securities. Has the town ever purchased securities in the past 10 years? Or
I've been here 15 years, and
Okay.
we have not. We have never purchased treasurers. We've certainly looked at them by 3 very reputable banks or broker-dealers. But the issue always was the documentation.
Okay.
And again, Jim, the documentation, I've seen them before. It's not it is somewhat plain vanilla. It's the difference between banking documentation, where a case might be arbitrated versus tried in New York versus Connecticut. There are a lot of issues for the lawyer protecting the town. I can't dispute them.
Is it, I'm sorry, is it an issue with the broker dealers, or is it an issue with, so my quick for instance is, you can buy treasuries right on treasurydirect.gov. Is it
No, I can't.
Why not?
Because again, all documentation for that, forever, for anything, I have to go through
Wayne?
our town council.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions for Joan? Joan, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mindful of people's schedules, or anybody in the back here for a particular reason, or? Okay. Okay. We're far more exciting than any other alternative. So let's go back to our agenda. We need to set the interest rate for the tax deferral.
Right, this
Jennifer.
is per the code. We set this every year, and it's based on the STIF earnings rate for December. So there are two plans for deferrals, one at 1/2 of 1% above the December investment earnings for STIF, and one at 1% above the December investment earnings. So that puts us at Plan A, 2.23%, and Plan B, 2.73%.
Hate to say it, but it's perfunctory, and we do it every year, and it's not much to change, if anything. So unless there's comments or questions, I would say motion to approve. Jim, second. Rob, all in favor? Thank you. All right. Next item, there was one other in transfers. You review administrative transfers, so Jennifer supplied us with a summary of transfers they've made since when?
From July 1st through
Okay.
February 19th. We've committed to doing this roughly every 6 months.
Okay.
So as of December 19th, we've done 15 administrative transfers. This could be myself or myself and Kate, based on the authorization levels, for a grand total of $91,587. And I did want to point out that 2 of those were really housekeeping issues related to the budget, Parks and Recreation, and Senior Center, where 2 of their personnel lines weren't in the right classification, part-time versus seasonal versus full-time. So when we remove those, we have 13 transfers totaling $15,500. So this is just to keep you informed of how we are using that authority that you've granted to us.
My only question is just why the 2 senior center amounts are different, unless there was only part of the senior center.
Only part of.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Process still working in terms of approval authorities, threshold
it works
amounts?
very
No problem?
No.
Okay. Any questions for Jen on this? Okay, do we need to approve this, or you? I
No,
don't think we do.
informational
Okay,
only.
thank you. All right, review of idle capital projects.
So this is another one where we've committed to looking at this twice a year, and it's really aimed at seeing what projects haven't had any activity and have been sitting idle for 18 months. So there are a few that are works in progress. They're a little slow to get going. So you'll see a column that says close out, yes or no. So the ones with an N, we're requesting to keep open, though you would have the final say on that, but they are in progress, and you can see some reasons why they haven't moved forward. There are a few that are recommended to be closed. Bottom of page 1, the Board of Finance Infrastructure Reserve at $162,902. This reserve is not needed, it's not active. The last activity was in fiscal 2016, and I believe it was originally set up to assist with the struggle of timing of RTM meetings. So this was viewed as something, it had already been appropriated. It could come to the Board of Finance if there was an infrastructure need. You could transfer out. But in the last several years, we have not used it, and we have the Board of Finance contingency reserve.
We just really need one reserve.
Right,
Okay.
so I would recommend just closing this out to the regular reserve that we have in there for Board of Finance.
Okay, what else?
Other big item is the digitizing of documents. We have $61,360 available. This was the one we moved money out earlier in the year for Fire Marshal to do some scanning. We hit up that account to do our IT study, which is underway, and we don't have any plans for the remaining funds, so we'd recommend closing
And
that.
the document digitization process is done.
For those departments that had a immediate need, yes. What comes out of the IT assessment, we may see that there's a recommendation to do more scanning, but I think that we should take those recommendations as their own project. Close out this one, it's over, it's done for the initial purpose. Move it into the contingency account, and if we need to do any other projects, appropriate from contingency.
Has the fire department finished their digitization work?
The fire marshal's office, I don't think it's complete, but it's not in this account. We moved it to its own account.
So they won't need any, they don't think they'll need any more?
No.
Okay.
And then the final one is a Board of Education project for masonry repairs. They've been kind of hanging on to the balance there just to make sure that everything is done and closed out. But the $25,220 that is remaining can be disposed to the Board of Finance reserve. So if we close out those items that I've highlighted, it will add just under $250,000 to the reserve, which puts your reserve balance at just under $1.1 million.
Hey, Jim, back to page 1. The Board of Finance one, is that a typo when it says 7107? Or did it actually start?
It really started that long
13 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was here when I got here, so it's been here a long time.
Yeah, it was established long ago, funded, a couple things in and out of there, and then it was just been
Sat
sitting
there?
Taylor?
I see that the bridge repairs are, we're waiting to find out if state funding is available. I mean, what is the possibility that's available, and do we need to address these projects?
I can follow up with Ed on that. He hasn't had a pressing need that has required him to put anything into this year's budget request, but I can ask him what his plan is if state funds are not available.
Okay. Terrific. Do we need to vote on these closeouts?
Yes.
So just a question on the Board of Finance reserve, is that the capital reserve?
No, you have a Board of Finance reserve in the capital non-recurring fund that is where we've always done the overs and unders when we close out projects. This one was another reserve, but it is not the equipment reserves or the town hall renovation reserve or some of the other reserves that are actually active. This was just another one sitting there.
So none of these are like the proceeds or bonds?
No, not at all. These are all within capital non-recurring, which is primary funding source is a contribution from the general fund.
I mean, in the spirit of all of this, is there any value in further consolidating those reserves?
The ones that we have remaining, I think, make sense. The largest one that we have is the fire apparatus reserve.
Well, no, I meant just the Board of Finance contingencies, because there's two now. There's this one and capital still left.
This is going to fold into your main capital one.
So we'll be
and
down
you'll
to
have one for
Great.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I want to make sure. Okay.
So there's nothing left in the capital account?
Well, no, this would move out of the Board of Finance because the capital account is the infrastructure account, right?
No, you have a Board of Finance reserve that we always track within the capital non-recurring.
Right.
That has $848,000 right now.
Yep.
This will add another $250 to that.
Right.
The close out of all these items. And then any non-project specific appropriation within the capital non-recurring will be in that one Board of Finance reserve.
Okay. Other questions? I'm fine with this. It's a policy we implemented a number of years ago to keep these projects honest, if you will, and close them out if we don't need them or they're done. So this is great. Motion to approve. Dan, second. Jim? All in favor? Great, thank you. Okay. Next up is designate representative for union negotiating team. So I talked to Frank. One thing, I don't know, Jim, did you have a point of view? Is that something you want to sign up for?
Yeah.
Okay, the only thing he mentioned is that sometimes these meetings are at inconvenient times. So I don't know whether you want to talk to the team about that in terms of just time expectations. I'm completely fine with you doing that, but I just want to make sure you get a chance to do that.
Yeah, I think the first one's coming up at 10:30.
I think,
Or 10 o'clock. Right, it's a morning.
yeah, that one's a morning.
Yeah.
Typically, they have been, in the ones that I've been involved with since I've been here, they've been afternoon meetings, but that'll be one of the items that we address in the first meeting or two is
Okay.
setting up that schedule.
All right, I'm okay with that if you are.
Fine.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so Jim will do that for that negotiating team, that's great. representative for the audit RFP process. So we talked about this at our prior meeting, and the point there is that it's time to put out the audit work for a proposal, and I think we're still going to get the incumbent to bid on that, with the idea that they would replace the partner or
Right.
leadership team. So I think that works, and in my mind would qualify them to continue if their bid was competitive. But we do need to embark on this process. Does anybody want to spend time on that? Rob? Okay.
Jen said she absolutely wanted me on this, so.
I know, she called me up. She called me up begging. It was really, really something.
Well,
So,
between you on that one and Jim on union negotiations.
Oh, boy.
I'll tell you what.
She'll smile all the way home.
Just float home.
And just so a little update on the audit RFP, it is posted out there. We posted it at the beginning of February, and responses are due back to us on March 4th.
Okay.
And Rich Rudel from Board of Ed took a look before we posted it. He was comfortable with it, and I've invited him to be a part of our review panel.
Okay.
Anything come in yet?
Not yet, no.
Okay, budget process. I've not brought printouts of all of this, but you all have seen from the emails that I sent a few things. One is an update of budget assignments to take into account our 2 new board members. And so what I would invite you to do is take a look at that list. If anybody's got any changes, I tried to keep it fairly balanced across all the responsibilities, but if anybody's got a change or something they'd like to do different, why, do let me know, and we'll try to get those finalized well in advance of our upcoming discussions.
The only one that jumps out to me right now looking at it, animal control, is actually handled by the police department, so it would probably make sense to have Dan and Rob do that.
Got it, okay. I did want to talk a little bit about the process we've had in place for quite a while, which is our buddy system with F&B and Jack and his crew. So just as a reminder, that policy or approach that we have to this entails us working collaboratively and concurrently with members of the RTM as we go through and do our review, so that they have a chance to ask questions along with us, and we minimize redundancy with anybody that we talk to. I still think that's a good process. I'll send you a copy of my budget assignments, Jack, which I neglected to do today, so that you'll have that and we can sync up those teams and actually identify who your folks are, match them up with our folks, and go from there.
I'll give you, we've already done some assignments, so I'll give you some telephone numbers and email
Great.
addresses. And I actually had some people that I had to pull back because they were already trying to meet with Kate, and I said, not until we have the Board of Finance member assigned.
So the other thing is, to your point, we want to try to keep everybody working together on that so we don't have redundant meetings. It's not that we can't, right? Everybody's got separate roles, but it minimizes the burden on town staff to do this. The other change that we made really last year was to sequence our inquiry, right? So we can take a look at the budget materials and come up with our own questions, but instead of going directly to department heads, the really first stop with this is Kate. And to have our groups, both Board of Finance and our TM or F&B groups, to meet jointly with Kate to go through our questions on whatever those town departments are. And that way we can hear from her, and if we're satisfied with those answers and we're good with that, the inquiry can stop there. But if we still have other inquiries that we feel like we're not getting answered in those discussions, we're more than welcome to go out and have meetings with department heads. I can envision a couple of big departments still getting meetings irrespective of this process, mainly police and library. But other than that, I'm hopeful that most of these other budgets can be covered with that process, which, if it works, obviates the need to meet with town department heads. So I felt like it worked well last year. A great starting point is to watch the videos from Kate's Board of Selectmen presentations. That gives a good overview of where things are now. So take a look at budget assignments. The calendar, I've got a corrected version I'll send that includes the schools tour for the Board of Education, which is on Saturday the 14th. Is that right, Jen?
Yes.
Saturday the 14th, as always, it's at Middlesex Middle School, and we meet there in the rotunda and start the tour from there. But I'll send out the revised calendar that's got that. Please go to that if you can. And then finally, the budget spreadsheet. So what Jen has done is update that spreadsheet with the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education approved budgets. That's our starting point. So we'll receive these meetings, or we'll receive the budgets next week at the meeting that's coming up. And this is This is the one of a couple, well, the statutory meeting that we need to have, which is around, no, I'm sorry, that's the 10th. The 3rd is one I'm talking about, which is we're going to receive the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education budgets next Tuesday, a week from today. That's the formal kickoff to our process, and that'll be followed a week later by the statutory meeting where we hear all parties in the public and their comments on the budget. So that's really kind of our launch-off point. What we'll need to do is to get our inquiries done between then and the first budget work session, which is at the end of March. So that kind of 2-week period, once we receive the budgets and the first working session, that's when we'll want to make sure we've had our meetings with Kate and try to get as many questions answered as possible. So another budget season upon us, but hopefully that will go smoothly. So take a look at all that, come up with the questions that you have for your respective departments, and let's see if we can put our sharp pencils to work and take a look at this budget. So any questions on the process or concerns? All right, Jen, financial report.
Okay. Big ticket item of property taxes. We've completely closed out our second collection period and we're doing very well. We've collected 98.22% of our budget. And that's one thing that I will have updated for you, our property tax collection history, so that we can have our discussion about the budgeted collection rate for the next year.
Any comments on the 98 versus 94% average collected on the past 5 years? I mean, we're doing great, but just why is that?
I don't know. I was trying to dig into that, and I can't figure out why. It's possible that in the last 2 years, we put in place a much less manual method for posting tax revenue.
Okay.
So before that, there was a longer lag. So it is possible that at this time of year, the January ones hadn't been posted by the time we ran the February reports. For it to be off that much, that's what I'm thinking it is, that there was missing January postings at the time, in prior Februaries. But then they were all trued up.
Okay.
Jim, just a question on that. Is that the percent of that we've collected as a percent of what's billed, or as a percent of what we originally budgeted?
Percent of the budget.
Like the percent of 99%.
Right. Right. So by the end of the year, we would expect that to be over 100%, slightly over. The other item, building permits. We actually have gotten some permit revenue in on the redevelopment projects because they've started demolition. And at our March meeting, I'm going to work with P&Z and Building to get you an update so that we can talk current year as well as give you some information as we work on the budget. But those projects are starting, and small amounts of permit revenue are starting to come in. On the expenditure side, all is well. There's nothing that stands out. Nope, everybody's pretty much on track. I did want to call your attention to page 6. So Board Finance Capital Reserve, what we just talked about with the idle projects that you closed out, that'll be close to $1.1 million. I think that's something that we could have a discussion during your budget deliberations on potential uses of that, because that is a rather significant balance in that reserve. And then unassigned fund balance with the $233,000 police HVAC, that brings us down to a projected fund balance, if the budget holds, all things being equal, of $22.8 million, which is still above our policy.
Okay.
And then finally, on pages 9 and 10, our active capital projects, our active bonded projects. Hopefully in March, I will be bringing to you some information so that we can start talking about sizing and issue. We have the big item is going to be Oxford Elementary School, but we also need to fund Highland Farm, and by then we should have we should know our final costs on the town hall generator and any portion of that we still need to fund. The Holmes roof and skylight and the Hindley roof replacement, those projects are, the Board of Ed is applying to the state for some school construction grants. Holmes roof and skylight, we had originally expected a much quicker timeline, so we did fully bond that. So I need to touch base with the Board of Education see if they really think they're going to complete the project in summer 2020. If they're not certain of that, we should consider moving the funds that we borrowed over to Oxbridge Elementary School that is spending money a little bit faster.
You know, John, as part of their budget, they gave start and stop dates for every outstanding. That's one of the follow-up to some of our questions for everyone. I'm not sure if you have that, but it's
I think I put it off to the side, but I think I've received that. Yeah, so that's going to be very helpful on our capital planning. But that is one over the next month that I'll work with the Board of Ed and see if we need to do anything with the funds that we've already borrowed.
Question regarding bonding. For a town our size, is there an optimal amount, a range of optimal amounts? Is it you shouldn't do more than 25, or is that not something to consider?
More than, I'm not so concerned about that. But we don't want to go out for too small of an amount because the issuance costs become, you know,
but if
they're about the same regardless of the size of the issue.
If we had an immediate need, we could bond the entire amount, and you wouldn't be concerned with the efficiency in the market for the bid?
No.
Okay.
No, but what we would need to be aware of are requirements to spend the proceeds of that sale within certain time.
Right.
and then it's like the negative carry of borrowing it too far ahead of time. But
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I do think,
That's
aren't there, I think there are some limitations. If we stay under X dollars per year, I think we become bank qualified.
Yes.
But I think the school will bring us over that anyway.
Right, it's a pretty low limit right now. I think it went back down to 10 million. Government Finance Officers Association is lobbying, trying to get that raised.
Went down, you said 5 million from 10?
10, I think it's back to 10, it went up to.
Is that fiscal year or
31%.
calendar year?
I think it's calendar. But with the Oxbridge project, more than likely, we're gonna be non-bank qualified for a few years.
Maybe just confirm that it's calendar, not fiscal, because we could always then squeak one in before the end of our fiscal to stay bank qualified for this small issuance
yeah, we could.
versus the big.
Yep.
Is that, and bank qualified has to do with the deductibility of carrying costs? Or something else with respect to banks?
I forget what it is from their perspective, but I know that it makes the issue more attractive.
Thank you. Okay.
It's a certain way where they can get benefits from
Right.
small issuers in terms of deductibility of the interest, but you can't
Yeah.
for like large.
Right. Yep. All right.
My only other question was anything on Town Aid Road, since we have not received those proceeds, are you
No, I
concerned
have
about
not
that?
heard anything more about that. I know that a while ago it was supposed to be going before the bond commission, but we have not received anything yet.
Okay. Any other questions for Jen on the financial report? Paul?
I asked her about putting a call on the bond. And it changed since the last time I was on the board. Could you briefly touch on that? If we had call bonds, we used to put like 5-year calls.
Right.
Out and then pay maybe 5 to 7 basis points. extra.
Right, and that's evaluated each time that we do issue. We have been putting about a 5-year call. What has really changed for us, that's the other thing too, is we can no longer do advanced tax exempt advance refundings. So there was language changed in the refunding resolution when we did the early redemption that allows us to do a taxable advance refunding, because that is allowed. But we are also, we might have the potential for about $14 million of a current refunding for what's callable in August. So that's another thing too that I'm trying to work into the sizing, because if we can do that refunding at the same time as a new issue, that would be great for sizing.
That's great. Okay.
John,
Jack?
just a quick question. When I was working with another municipality, what I understood that the rating agencies were looking at for towns, in Connecticut at least, was that the guidelines, one of the guidelines was that your total bonding should not be greater than 2% of what your grand list is. So if that tells, that gives you a range of what our max might be as opposed to what was operating in town for the longest time as an arbitrary $100 million amount. So I don't know
Well,
if that's still.
if the grand list is $9 billion, 900 million, 90 million times 2, that's 180 million. We're not
Right,
anywhere,
now, I'm not saying
anywhere
that
in
we're
that zip
getting
code.
there,
So
I'm just saying that shows where we are in a percentage of what they would be looking at, and we're well below that.
yeah, duly noted, I think we're good though.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions for Jen on the financial report? Okay, approval of minutes from December 17th. These look pretty good. I read through them and did not have any questions myself. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Have you looked at these, Dan?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. It looks great.
My edits.
That's awesome. Okay, motion to approve. The only person who was not here was Jim, so motion to approve Dan and Rob. And Rob, all in favor? Okay, we'll do 5 to 0 to 1 abstention since Jim wasn't here. Thank you. Okay, Chairman's report. I'll talk about Oxbridge Building Committee next time, but I did not have anything else to add into that, other than I just want to stress that we do want to work with Joan and Jack in terms of next steps on Treasury and the Board of Finance's role with that, so we will spend some time with her over the course of the next couple of weeks, and then make sure we have something available for public presentation at our March meeting. But I didn't have anything else unless anybody else had something further. I think we're done this evening. Anything else? Okay. Motion to adjourn. Bob? All in favor? We are adjourned.